Okay, so we're explaining the difference between reliability and validity. These two terms can get kind of tricky, so I'm going to kind of break them down and then explain the differences and examples behind each one of them. So validity is whether the claims and decisions made on the basis of assessment results are sound, meaningful, and useful for the intended purpose of the results. And this is found on page 110. So to break it down, the best way I remember it is can it measure what it's supposed to measure? And there's different types of validity that you also wanted us to describe. Content validity involves how adequately the test represents the content domain of the identified construct. That's word for word on page 114. And I was like, wow, that's wordy. So I was like, what exactly does that mean? So I did a little bit of searching and found that the best way I can explain it is it means how well a test measures the behavior for which it is intended. So it measures what it's supposed to measure is what you're looking at. So example would be like a psychology test that is supposed to cover sleep patterns. Was this on the test? Did it cover this area of study well? That would be content validity. Excuse me. The second one is criterion-related validity. This refers to the relationship between test results and some external variables associated with the identified construct. And this is whenever I was like, okay, what is a construct? Because this was like mentioned several different times throughout the text for these two chapters also, 5 and 6. So on page 112, it goes into details about constructs. These are developed concepts, ideas, or hypotheses that are used to describe behavior. Can it be measured directly or observed? Or can't be measured directly or observed? So some examples of this would be like intelligence, self-esteem, something that you're trying to measure. So I felt like that helped with understanding the criterion-related validity definition. So it refers to the relationship between test results and some external variables associated with the identified construct. So it's the extent to which a measure is related to an outcome. And another way to think of it is how well one measure predicts an outcome for another measure. And then I felt like the best way for me to remember the other two, because there's a lot of different types of validity, is to kind of break it down. So criterion validity is divided into two different other types of validity, concurrent and predictive. So concurrent validity is correlations between test scores and existing criterion measures. So again, like I said, that's another book definition that I thought was kind of wordy. So I was like, what exactly does that mean? So it helped me by looking a little bit deeper on that and finding that it means the type of evidence that can be gathered to defend the use of a test for predicting other outcomes. So does the test correlate well with a measure that has been recently validated? And then predictive validity. An example of this would be the SAT. Apparently predicts success in college. So it's the correlations between test scores and predictive criterion measures. If the test accurately predicts what it's supposed to predict. So some examples of criterion measures would be like school grades, cell records, and things like that. I always feel like it's easier to match examples to definitions. Construct validity pertains to the appropriateness of inferences drawn from test scores on the construct being measured. And lastly and finally, we have face validity. Does the test appear to be measuring what it says it is measuring? That's the main question. So then we switch over to reliability. This refers to the degree which test scores are dependable, consistent, and stable upon additional testing measures. And that's page 97. And there was also many examples on that page. I personally think that it's easier to think of reliability as consistent results across time. So if you look at it one time and then look at it again, is it going to give you the same results? If you took a test in the morning and then took a test at night, like, are you going to get the same score on that test, or is it going to be like way two different scores? That's actually that leads me to one of the types of reliability: test, retest, reliability. Same test given twice with time interval between testings, and test to see if the scores are consistent over time. That's one type of reliability. Another is internal consistency, and this can be located on page 99. Do the items on a test measure the same ability or trait? So another way of saying this is how well each item relates independently to other items on the test, and how well the items relate to the overall test score. And lastly, we have inter-rater. So one test is given and two individuals independently score the test. Are these different observers consistent in their judgment? So like I said, consistency is like the best way I can remember reliability. So reliability, is it dependable? Is it consistent? Is the result stable over time? And then validity, is it measuring what it says it's going to measure? That's how I remember the two. I also liked breaking it down between the three types with reliability. If you're looking at test and retest reliability, we're looking about over time. If you're looking at internal consistency, you're more focusing across items. And lastly, inter-rater reliability, you're looking across different researchers. I felt like that really helped me find the difference between and understand the difference between those three. So to answer the last question about having one without the other and if one is more important than the other, yes, tests can be one without the other. So like, for example, a test can be reliable and still be invalid, and an unreliable test can never be valid. And this all is explained on page 113. So I personally think that they both are important, though, when creating an assessment. Both will help you measure the quality and usefulness of a test. So I think that covers everything.